Good day, everyone. How are you? Can't hear your answer, of course, but so it's nice to be asked. And with the closing of the Monster Hunter Wilds beta, everyone who can run the game could get a general feel on how to play their weapon of choice. With that said, I'm incredibly worried about the state of the fabled bug stick. Not only does the playstyle of the weapon change a fair bit from game to game, but the changes in Universal Editions and Wild might just make the only weapon I play feel disregarded. But to get the full scope of my worries for Insect Glaive, we have to look at all of its G rank and Master rank appearances and take some notes from speedrunners, to get the upper limits of the weapon. With that out of the way, let's start at the beginning with Monster Hunter 4 Ultimate. Okay, before we continue, I think I have to mention that I really only played Rise and did research on the other games through YouTube. So if I get anything wrong, feel free to correct me in the comments. For Ultimate is the introduction of Insect Glaive in G rank, now known as Master rank, and a lot of the core aspects of the weapon were laid out here. The extracts are one of the core features of the weapon, being attained through the Insect, and the color depends on where the Insect hit, with red increasing your attack and changing your attacks to stronger versions, white increasing your movement speed, and orange increasing defense. These three gave additional buffs depending if you had two or more at the same time. There's also green extract, which healed you a small bit. In this game, Insect Glaive was like an in-between of dual blades and longswords, but with one addition, the pole vault. To understand the significance of this move, we must discuss what for you added to all weapons arsenals: mounting attacks. Mounting was a mechanic added due to the increased verticality in the maps for this game. By jumping off a ledge and attacking a monster, you could deal mounting damage to it and eventually mount it. Then, if you stay on for long enough, the monster will be knocked down, creating an opening and a brief respite mid-fight. Now, while strong, you had to jump off a ledge, which was completely dependent on the monster's position on the map. However, Insect Glaive could pole vault, using a bit of stamina to place themselves in the air, allowing to mount the monster in any location. While speedrunners never really used mounting, it was a huge benefit for newer players in hunting parties, even if attacking the mounted monster made things worse. With all this, Insect Glaive had a strong first showing, which would only get crazier in the next game. Now, while the basics of Insect Glaive were basically the same in Generations Ultimate, sans separating the Insect upgrades from the weapon, the two Universal Editions really changed how you could play this weapon, the Hunter Styles and Hunter Arts. Starting with hunting styles, Guild Style is the most basic style, being the closest to 4U in terms of playing the game, with two available Hunter Arts. Striker Style removes some of your attacks so you can do more Hunter Arts, and has 3 available Hunter Arts. Alchemy Style is a way to buff yourself and allies, and has 3 available Hunter Arts. Adept Style removes all your Insect control for an evade that can obtain extracts, and has 2 available Hunter Arts. Aerial Style enhances your pole vault so it could fling you in a direction, changes up your aerial attacks to do more damage, and has 1 available Hunter Art. And Valor Style adds Valor Stance that auto evades and provides stronger versions of your attacks. Valor State, which buffs your attacks and further makes you dodge faster. It also has 1 available Hunter Art. The Hunter Arts given to the Insect Glaive are Extract Hunter, which sends out the Insect and obtains all 3 extracts if it hits a monster, Swarm, which passively does damage around you and can change properties when used with different extracts, Bug Blow, which does huge damage and can combo with Swarm, and lastly, Bug Major, which allows the Insect to do more damage when you attack more often. Valor Style is the preferred playstyle for Insect Glaive speedrunners, with their Hunter Arts being either Extract Hunter to keep triple extract uptime, or Absolute Readiness, a Hunter Art all weapons had access to, which does a big dodge and regains sharpness. While not a huge departure from 4 Ultimate, the additions to this game change how the Glaive plays, especially if you don't care about speedrunning. But a new addition in the next game would show promises of a new way the Insect Glaive could play. In World, Hunter styles and Hunter arts were removed, but some things were reworked into the base kit, like the improved aerial attacks from Aerial Style and Bug Blow, now renamed Descending Thrust. On top of that, some additions were made, such as a way to mark the monster with a melee attack and interactions with the slinger that can lengthen your extract's uptime and or increase your Insect stamina. They also introduced Insect powders, which can be attacked to either deal damage with status buildup or heal nearby allies. Additionally, the Insect upgrade system was changed to be a bit more like weapons instead of feeding them nectars. Oddly enough, they also weakened some of the buffs having 2 or more extracts gave. However, one of the coolest additions was the Jumping Advancing Slash, or the Helicopter if it's in the strong version, but more specifically, its follow-up, Vaulting Dance, affectionately nicknamed the Bounce. The Bounce allowed you to stay in the air for prolonged amounts of time after landing the last hit of Helicopter, and you could easily reposition using the mid-air evade. Despite this, speedrunners of Iceborne preferred to stay on the ground to do more consistent damage, and use the Clutch Claw or Descending Thrust to do massive damage. But with such a cool addition in the Helicopter, one could ponder what they could do if they just made the aerial playstyle better in nearly every way. As pointed out in the video What Your Favorite Monster Hunter Weapon Says About You, Ark notes that mounting was Insect Glaive's main claims to fame, which was removed in Rise and replaced with Wyvern raiding. Even then, with Wirebugs, verticality became available to all weapons. On top of that, the Helicopter's max usage was reduced from 5 to 3. So with 2 of Insect Glaive's big talking points gone, and one addition seemingly nerfed, what does it do? Simple. The weapon takes to the sky. Of course, thanks to switch skills, you can still play on the ground, which will, in theory, do more damage. Having Awakened Insect attack, use all 3 extracts to send a Powder Insect that could then use Powder Vortex seems like a great addition to playing on the ground. However, in practice it would fall short because of 4 huge factors now letting the bug stick soar. The first change was to aerial combat, which was, with every use of the bounce, the next aerial attack will get slightly stronger. Keep that in mind. Next was the switch skill, Advancing Round Slash, which replaced Leaping Slash. While Leaping Slash was faster and a better option to simply unsheath a weapon, Advancing Round Slash could do more damage and, more importantly, parry attack, perform the bounce. However, it did remove one use of Helicopter. This parry could parry anything from bites to beams, and even roars. This is important because of the Silkbind attack, Diving Wyvern. This was a strong finisher for an aerial playstyle, and because it counts as an aerial attack, it gets stronger after each use of the bounce. However, while all of these additions were potent, they all relied on Jumping Advancing Slash to do a bounce, which, while strong, was prone to missing and left you extremely vulnerable while it was doing the attack. This is where the final piece falls into place, the switch skill, Insect Slash. This move replaced Jumping Advancing Slash, and while it did less damage, it gave much more control and had much less commitment. It also could get extracts without red extract, and with it, turn Jumping Slash into Enhanced Insect Spiker, a decent alternative finisher to Wyvern Dive. It even kept the fabled bounce. That singular trade-off meant that Insect Glaive had more opportunities to attack while airborne, so while a grounded playstyle could theoretically do more damage, an aerial playstyle becomes way more practical in most situations. It's also the preferred playstyle of most Insect Glaive speedrunners. In this game, I've intercepted Basil Goose's bombing raid, contested a Risen Crimson Glow Valstrax in the air, and leaped over Risen Cruciala de Oro's tornadoes. There are even ways to basically stay in the air indefinitely with the skills Wind Mantle and Frenzied Bloodlust. When making Insect Glaive and Sunbreak, they were probably told, the sky's the limit, and they took that to heart. So with 2 amazing iterations of Insect Glaive in the 5th generation to work off of, what could possibly necessitate this video to discuss Insect Glaive in Wilds? Well, Before we discuss the problems I have with Wild's Insect Glaive, I feel like I have to say that nothing is final in the Wild's beta, and you could potentially see change in the full release. With that being said, the amount of changes to the Insect Glaive is genuinely confusing, especially when no other weapon got the same treatment. The first change I'd like to talk about is the removal of Vaulting Dance. This basically removes the aerial playstyle for Insect Glaive. While this is greatly disappointing, especially after Sunbreak's efforts to make the playstyle better, I feel like it would be better to talk about what the Insect Glaive currently is in Wilds than what it could be, or at least for this segment of the video. Next, I'd like to talk about Focus Mode. Whenever you attack when in Focus Mode, you send out your Insect and it can gain an extract. While this sounds good, it basically means you never not want to be in Focus Mode with this weapon, which basically requires you to use the camera much more than usual, which would be fine until you remember this is the only weapon that gets this much utility and damage in Focus Mode. Next, I'd like to talk about the extract changes. Now you need all 3 extracts to use the strong version of attacks and not just red. Instead, red allows you to start charging for a flurry of attacks that can either be used on the ground or in the air. And having all 3 extracts lets you charge for longer and for an even bigger barrage. Additionally, you can charge your Insect to have it drill through and obtain multiple extracts, and focus strikes on wounds can help with triple extract upkeep. While all of this is cool, there are several glaring issues with this new system. For one, needing all 3 extracts for the strong version sounds fair until you realize it makes it so you are using the normal version of attacks for longer, and those feel so bad in comparison to their strong versions, necessitating that you always prioritize getting all 3 extracts. Now on most monsters, this is not a big deal, but on Raid Dao, you basically need to charge your Insect to get orange extract off his back, which sucks because you then need to wait a decent amount of time after that before the Insect returns. This problem is integrated into an addition of Insect Glaive, Rising Spiral Slash, a flashy new move that uses up your extracts but could get you up to 3 extracts, which is cool until you realize that you can obtain the same extract multiple times, and even worse, you could get 3 green extracts, which was not common, but is terrifyingly plausible. Every time I used this attack, it was a misinput because it doesn't guarantee that I'll get at least 2 extracts back, which ties into my previous issue. Of course, you can do a focus strike at the end of the attack, but that requires wounds, and that makes this move more situational than I think it should be. Even then, the issue of needing to break a wound is exacerbated in multiplayer because anyone can break it, making you lose out on triple extract upkeep. And don't even get me started on playing this weapon on a standard PS5 or Xbox Series X controller. Being able to manage all of these mechanics when you need to use the camera, and you also need to charge your attack, and you also need to attack, and you also need to hold down focus, is a bit much to ask for. Not to mention that your pole vault would require an entirely different hand configuration. Speaking of, another issue is that because your strong attacks are locked behind having 3 extracts, you'll almost never use pole vault because you want to be charging an attack and not leaping into the air. This means that Insect Glaive is only slightly better than most weapons in terms of mounting, weakening another one of its identities. Speaking of identity, the underlying issue with this weapon is that it no longer feels like Insect Glaive. The need for all 3 extracts, the charging of attacks, and the overcommitment on a lot of the new attacks makes it feel so different. How I saw Insect Glaive in older games is like how I saw a hammer, a weapon that could make its own opportunities to attack, whether it be through mounting or being able to soar through the skies, but those have been greatly watered down in turn for a playstyle with way more commitment. It's like, instead of making Gunlance, they replaced Lance with Gunlance. In fact, they probably could have made a new weapon with similar mechanics and revert a few changes to the Insect Glaive. Instead, we were given a complete overhaul that left much to be desired. So with that in mind, how can we make this new Insect Glaive be a bit more in tune with both of its old and new identities? One change that would help the Insect Glaive is replacing Jumping Advancing Slash with Insect Attack, while also bringing back Vaulting Dance. This makes it easier to get certain extracts without charging your Insect, and because this move is less risky, you'd probably be using it more often than Jumping Advancing Slash, meaning that you would mount the monster more often. Now, while I wanted Vaulting Dance to return, it doesn't mean I'm completely reviving the aerial playstyle. Instead, if you try to do another Kinsect attack, you would instead do Enhanced Kinsect Spiker, meaning that your options after a Kinsect attack are to Mid-Air Evade, Jumping Slash, Enhanced Kinsect Spiker, and Descending Thrust. An alternative change they could make is reverting how Red Extract works, by simply making it so we still get strong versions of attacks by only having Red Extract would make it so that I feel like I'm not struggling to play the Insect Glaive half the time. Another change they can make is to how obtaining extracts work. Since you can now obtain 2 or more extracts at a time, they should make it so you can't get more than one of the same extract color in the Kinsect, and when you hit the same part twice, you would get a different extract, making another way to make getting the strong version of attacks easier. This also means you won't completely rely on focus mode to get extracts because that only gets 1 extract at a time. There are a few changes they could make to this weapon to make it feel a bit more like its older self or a more complete version of its new self, so here's to hope for positive changes in the wild Insect Glaive's future. Insect Glaive has always been a unique weapon, starting as the Mounting King in 4th gen and even becoming the Sky Baron in 5th gen. Then Wilds comes along and makes it neither of those, making many who enjoyed the previous iterations of Insect Glaive confused. While the direction they went in isn't bad, there are definitely improvements that need to be made before Wilds is full release, whether through undoing some removals or implementing some needed additions. But only time will tell if any of our worries will be addressed. And with that, we've reached the end of the video. And even then, I guess I'll be seeing ya.